Neha, getting all the African countries in on board, and that kind of said that we were ready to walk the talk on this, the global south. In fact, our background here, I just realized when you were talking about the north and south thing, you have Xi Jinping looking northwards and you have the Prime Minister looking southwards, you know, in both indicating their priorities where it kind of lies.
Can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
You see, there is one, there's one distinct shift in this administration. If you look at our history under Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, we were wedded to internationalism and socialism in our foreign policy.
Yes.
Under Narasimha Rao, with the collapse of communism and demise of socialism in West and South Asia, the shift was towards internationalism, which is of globalization.
Right.
Now, BJP is a different party because every party's political setup influences foreign policy. So, the Prime Minister is also reflecting those roots. So, I just want to take you through those roots, because when we talk about Global South, we must understand who inspires them. It's like Moropant Pingle of RSS or Gurumurthy. It was way back in 1998, people within the RSS and BJP were talking about India first. They were saying what was the basis of the Indian freedom struggle. So the argument was it was nationalism wedded to Swadeshi.
Right.
Okay. More like America first. So our Global South is also has an element of that Atmanirbharta which Prime Minister and the RSS has been talking about. India first, as she said, Neha, but married to Swadeshi, you know, manufacturing, self-reliance. And then it gets married to Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So they are all interconnected words. So if you look at the 4 or 5 words of soft power, I'll read them out to you a little later. It has an element of Sanskriti, it has an element of Samvad, it has element of Samanvay, it has an element of Samman, and it has an element of Suraksha. Okay, I got them right. All S. So, the Global South is a very natural outcome of what Prime Minister has grown up thinking, which means that we have to lead with cooperation, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Because I think when we talk about North, it's a different ball game.
Right, and the North is largely colonialism, all of that baggage. And incidentally, I mean, China was also a victim. That's what surprises me. China was a victim of colonialism. They were occupied by the Japanese, they were occupied by the Western countries. They call it a century of humiliation.
How will any country lead whose traffic in context of movement of people globally after COVID has gone down by 62%?
Right.
China is under glorious isolation under Xi Jinping.
Yes.
It's down by 62%. 62%. So which means that people aren't coming to China and Chinese aren't going out of China. How can they lead Global South? I think you are right. India will lead Global South because it wants to lead Global South because they need to be open for Global South. But China is a closed country right now with hoardings in Shanghai. Look out for spies.
Look out for spies, and don't forget those crowds of Chinese trying to break into the United States, the illegal migrants.
That's true.
I mean, it's absolutely shocking to see the...
You know, Sandeep, 2 events that have happened in recent history that have been really defining and that have shaped the world opinion is, of course, the pandemic. You know, at a time when the world was struggling with the vaccine, India stood up and actually gave 100 countries vaccine. 150 others actually took vaccines and bought vaccines from India. And that has shaped the world opinion as well. I mean, look at all the countries of the Global South. Look at that defining image of one of the heads of the states actually touching the feet of the Prime Minister and crying while receiving him. Similarly with the African Union President,
the Pacific Islanders, they were...
So, I think that's been a defining moment and that's something that history will remember. Secondly, is the time of the war. You know, there are 2 wars that have shaped the world opinion, divided the world completely. And here is India, that is not with one bloc or the other, but is talking about not an era of war. Prime Minister speaking that at the G20 summit in Bali. And also, India emerging as a global peace catalyst. You know, we are not brokers, we are not Qatar, but we are certainly talking to all sides. You know, Prime Minister is speaking to Putin at the same time Biden, at the same time the Ukrainian president as well. So we have close important ties, be it trade, be it defense, be it cultural aspirations, be it education, and that will certainly continue.
You know, it's like this map. I'll give you an example, then I rest my case. It's like this map. Africa is far bigger than Greenland, but if you
Yes.
look at the representation of Greenland in
Yeah.
Europe, it looks bigger.
The Mercator
entire
projection.
Europe, the half of it can be inside Australia, where it looks smaller.
Yes.
So the map sums it up.
Absolutely.
Because this is the universal map used for gridding, military purpose. But it does not represent South America, Africa, and Australia. You
Right.
have to use this map because there is no other real scale representation. But the fact is
Yes.
that that's not the real representation of Greenland or Russia.
Absolutely not. And in fact, you know, this point we spoke about earlier, the fact that how India and China are different, Neha, in the way they approach the global south.
Yes.
The Belt and Road Initiative.
Exactly.
It's a classic case of China saying, I know what's good for you, what's good for the rest of the world. Here is my $1 trillion plan for the whole world. Everybody needs to sign up and line up behind me.
Yeah.
And you have India with a very cautious saying about a couple of years back, it takes a cautious route and say, listen, we will leave it to the countries of the global south, a lot of them, to decide what's good for them.
In fact,
And if you look at the kind of interest rates as well,
Yeah.
China charges something like 3%,
Yes.
and India is exactly half of that. That clearly tells you the difference between the approach of these two countries.
That's what I wanted to talk about, and I also want to build on what Aditya said earlier to draw a distinction between how these countries have dealt with the rest of the world. Aditya talked about how vaccine Maitri or India's vaccine diplomacy earned us a lot of goodwill and praise from all over the world at a time when we ourselves were struggling with the massive population that we have. But we were sort of large-hearted enough to help out 100 countries with life-saving vaccines at the height of the pandemic.
Because it was the right thing to do.
It was the right thing to do, and it earned us a lot of global goodwill.
It did.
So the pharmacy of the world, in a sense, was suddenly the vaccine manufacturing hub of the world. Now compare that with exactly what you just mentioned. China's attitude towards its smaller neighbors. The term that's now used is debt trap diplomacy.
Trap diplomacy.
That is what China has been practicing, through its Belt and Road Initiative. The expansionism and the hegemony that have been on display, that is not something that you see with India. India is not a country that is eyeing someone's territory. We're not seen as a threat to anybody. We are not seen as expansionists. We're not seen as bullies.
We're a status quo as power, I guess.
And I just want to quickly give out a few examples of what China has done to smaller Asian countries through the Belt and Road Initiative. I think it would be very safe to call it economic coercion and bullying, under the guise of offering economic help to countries which it has eventually turned into its satellites. Pakistan is of course a great example, but before that, countries like Sri Lanka, it lost an asset like Hambantota port to China, Mombasa port, Kenya losing it to China, several areas of Pakistan thanks to the CPEC.
And let's not forget the Maldives.
The Maldives.
It's almost there.
The Maldives is almost there.
Yeah.
Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, it is a very long list.
Right.
India doesn't do that. India doesn't do that to its friends.
Right.
India doesn't do that to its neighbors. And India, if anything, it's looking to safeguard and further the interests of the global south. It is not acting as a hegemonic expansionist bully.
So then going back to what Karthik has said, that then perhaps China is correct in doing what it did, because this is exactly the model the global north did to enslave all these countries by colonialism.
China is a neo-colonizer.
Yeah, so
like for example, in Cambodia, China has taken over the electricity grid. Tajikistan, obviously they don't have a port, but they have lost a portion of the land. They had to give it back to the Chinese. So there's no Chinese model of development. That's Chinese model of influence.
Yes.
There is no Chinese model of development for Southeast Asia, West Asia. China is trying to reorder the world for itself. For example, China's militarization of the third pole. It is to control water for South Asia and Southeast Asia. Who wants to militarize the third pole? They are militarizing the third pole. So I don't think that the cooperation they'll get. But the challenge, again, I'll say for India is that we have to match up China in economy. Years ago, there was a very famous interview by Arun Shourie, I think when Vajpayee was in power. It was about the priorities, and they said that next 15 years we have to match up China, because China continues to grow and the difference is 10 times, then we will not have the capacity. Because ultimately the will has to be married with strength, and the strength has to be married to your ability to actualize what you want to do. That's the most important thing. G20 was important because everyone said there will be no consensus.
Right.
I think why do we celebrate G20?
Yes.
There'll be no draft.
Yeah.
There'll be no draft. We had a draft.
Exactly the
However
opposite
we
happened.
managed it, it's irrelevant. It's like ek ball se jito ya do ball se jito. We won. We
Right.
won that day.
Right.
So, you know, Prime Minister delivered. So I think it showed diplomatic heft, muscle, market, his personality, but all came together. But again, I would say the challenges is the way the politics of North is reordering the world, which is the war in Syria and the Israel theater, the so-called tension in the Taiwan theater, the so-called tension in Ukrainian theater, the complete collapse of the economic corridor, which had to go through Saudi Arabia. These are our challenges.
Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.